Welcome to CBS News New York. I'm Dick Brennan. The Republican primary debate in the race for New York's next governor just wrapped up on CBS 2. The candidates, former Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino, former Special Assistant to President Trump Andrew Giuliani, businessman Harry Wilson, and Suffolk County Congressman Lee Zeldin all took the debate stage. And our panel now is to break it all down for you. Joining me here in the studio are political strategists Javier Lacayo and Basil Smikle. And with us virtually, Robert George, a member of the editorial board at Bloomberg. Guys, thanks all for being here and joining us now for the roundtable. And I guess the big question, I'll start with you, Robert. Did the candidates do what they had to do? And who was the winner and who was the loser? What do you think? Easy question.
Thank you. And by the way, I should say that I'm not virtual just because I'm somehow supporting Andrew Giuliani. That's not the case. That's not the case. That was just kind of a scheduling issue. That's why I'm here virtually. Perfect. I'm honored to be here. I think it was pretty clear that it was interesting that Andrew Giuliani was in a separate studio because of his objection to mandates and so forth, because he, in a sense, was kind of separate from the other three. Astorino and Wilson were both going after Zeldin, and Zeldin was going after them. You had a little bit of criticism sometimes between Astorino and Wilson, but not so much. So I mean, it suggests that those two see kind of Zeldin as something of the front runner because he got he's got the endorsement of the Republican committeemen and so forth. But I thought they made the important points that they wanted to make. Zeldin went after Wilson repeatedly as a never Trumper. So kind of exercising that the power that Trump has on the base to try and make Wilson unacceptable to that group, whereas Astorino emphasized his background as a county executive, and that he's got that kind of experience that none of the others can match. And Wilson, tried to point out the fact that he comes from the private sector, and he's an outsider, and his expertise is in turnaround, which he sees what New York is necessary. So I think they emphasized the main points that they wanted, and I would. If I was pushed, I think I might give the slight edge to Astorino, but it was pretty much a wash.
Okay, let's talk about style. And I want to go to a clip, and then, gentlemen here in the studio, I'm going to get to you guys. But the style of Zeldin seemed very much to me like attack, attack, attack. Let's look at one of his exchanges with Harry Wilson.
In the years since, he has asked me multiple times to run for statewide office. In January of this year, he asked me to be on his ticket.
I never asked, and I wouldn't ask Never Trumper Harry Wilson.
January 12th, you did. I've got the notes from that conversation. Don't lie. Don't lie.
Okay, that is a 0% chance. But as far as
100% chance, you did.
I wouldn't want you to serve as governor. I asked Allison Esposito, commanding officer and deputy inspector of the 70th precinct.
Stop lying.
Yeah, it kind of went that way.
Yeah. Dick, what I think was really interesting is that you saw that the candidates were really playing to different audiences tonight, and you actually saw it reflect in their style. Andrew Giuliani very much playing the victim in a lot of the same ways we've seen Trump and other Republicans in that mold play. We've seen, Lee Zeldin really bringing out the name-calling handbook, Rolex Rob, that was Never Trumper, yeah. Harry. And I think what you saw from, Harry Wilson, from Rob Astorino, were two candidates who had run statewide before, had successfully gotten Republican nominations before, and they were reflecting that style in the way that they were responding to the different questions.
Yeah, but I will also say, Basil, it seems like they're looking for a different base than, let's say, Harry Wilson, who ran, I think, in 2012 when he ran for controller. It seems like the base of the party is somewhere else, or at least they certainly think so.
Well, listen, and to everything that's been said before, being a rhino, I guess, is being a non-Trump supporter. It is clear that Andrew Giuliani and Lee Zeldin want to embrace Trump, want to give him that bear hug in an interesting way that Youngkin, who ran for governor of Virginia, did not do.
Right.
And so it really is interesting to see where the Republican voters are going to go here. They clearly, throughout the entire debate, painted New York as the enemy. It's like everything about New York City is apparently god-awful and evil, and appealing to sort of those upstate and rural voters and those suburban voters, particularly when you heard the conversation around schools. And so it'll be interesting to me to see, you know, do the Republican voters of the state want someone who's more of a general election voter, or someone that is really that sort of Trump enthusiast and that Trump ideological purist?
Of course, something we saw in the Democratic debate last week was an emphasis on the issue of crime. And we saw that all over again. And there was one person in particular, we heard the word Alvin Bragg probably more than any other name tonight. Let's listen into some of the candidates, not just talking about Alvin Bragg, but also about guns and crime.
We have a district attorney right now in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, who should be fired. I mean, he is refusing to prosecute crimes. And the biggest problem is they drop criminal charges when somebody is arrested with an illegal possession of a weapon. That should never be. We should actually add charges and penalties to gun crimes.
The governor had a task force that was formed 2 years ago. She did not even make her appointments made to the task force until after the tragedy in Buffalo. And so that is the problem, is ineffective government not dealing with the core problem rather than blaming the citizens who are law-abiding.
We should repeal the unconstitutional SAFE Act. We should change the law in New York from may issue to shall issue. The United States Supreme Court should overturn New York State's concealed carry law. We have the strictest gun control laws in the entire country. We should fire DAs like Alvin Bragg, who refuse to enforce the law.
Are you saying we should go back to the programs that your father instituted, broken windows and stop, question, and frisk?
Yes, I am, Marcia, clearly. And I look at it this way. When you look at when stop, question, and frisk in the late 90s, when we were between 70 and 100,000 stops a year, every single year the Justice Department ruled it constitutional.
Okay. Go ahead, Robert. Go right ahead.
No, I was going to say that was actually I was actually a little bit surprised. I was with Andrew Giuliani's response there, because he was making, and I think it was very smart, kind of tactically. He was making a distinction on stop, question, and frisk between how it was run, how it was executed in New York, you know, when Rudy was there, and when a few years later, under say Mayor Bloomberg and Ray Kelly, that he said that's when it became quotas, and it became kind of out of control. I think it was a rare time that I'd seen a Republican candidate basically nodding that there were problems with stop, question, and frisk, but there was a distinction between the two periods.
Can we look at the fact that, and we know that the bail reform has become such an issue in Albany, but these guys sound in some cases like they're running for mayor and not governor, because we know that the governor only can do so much. What's your reaction to the really strong, I mean, I guess it's common sense, but crime is crime, and people want to hear that someone's going to be tough on crime, even though they don't necessarily have a great control over it. Javier.
You know, I think the problem that a lot of these candidates have is that they're not running against against Alvin Bragg, right? They want to keep invoking his name, but at the end of the day, they're going to be most likely running against Governor Hochul, who has actually towed a really careful line here, right? She was able to pass, in this past legislative session, a lot of sensible reforms to the bail reform laws that were passed under Cuomo, and has been able to sort of keep both sides happy.
Well, not all sides.
Not all sides, but
she's playing. I mean, a lot of people said she pulled back too soon.
Yeah, but she's playing a delicate balance, and she's playing a general election game. You know, on this issue and on many others, what I think we saw tonight was the Republicans here going to the extremes, and it's not going to help them in a general election.
Well, I think Rob Astorino, and you may have pointed this out while we were watching, because we all sit around here. That's what we're doing here, folks. It's like a living room. Okay, it's like we're watching a football game, only for us, that's our football game, a debate. But Basil, the idea that all of them, it didn't seem like all of them were running that far. I mean, Rob Astorino, I think, Javier, you said he seemed like he was running a general election campaign himself. What do you think, Basil?
You know, I think that's absolutely right. But when you when you talk about this, you know, gun control and bail reform, I mean, even Tom Suozzi was talking about bail reform. So Democrats are actually talking about, because he's running to Kathy's right. What's interesting is as you listen to the debate, and they kept talking about these hot button issues, defund police and so on. If you really think about it, Mayor Adams was elected on not defunding the police. So it's not necessarily something that African Americans or New Yorkers have been screaming for, but it's clearly a hot button issue tied to Alvin Bragg, tied to all these other areas where they're trying to sort of demonize New York progressives or Democrats, New York City progressives or Democrats versus sort of, suburban and rural voters. So that's the play that they're going for.
And also we had the news just a few days ago that Chesa Boudin in San Francisco was recalled.
That's right.
That became a question that Marcia and Maurice asked. And the idea is, okay, that's a quick solution to what voters see as a problem. A DA that gets in there that isn't doing his job. And Boudin, look, arguably San Francisco, one of the most liberal cities in America.
And let me add, just a couple of months ago, San Francisco recalled 3 school board members.
Yeah.
So there's this real question about sort of woke politics versus pragmatic politics. The parents there felt that these woke school board members weren't focused on getting their kids back to school in the pandemic. And so this sort of reaction to woke politics, we're seeing it across the country. There's a reason that so much of this conversation is happening at the school board level, because it is a big part of a larger conversation about individual rights, states' rights, individual liberty, and those are very strong Republican lines.
And if memory doesn't fail me, I think as far ago as his first run in 2010, when Harry Wilson was running for comptroller, I seem to remember him even then talking about the importance of New York having initiatives, referendums, and recall. So it seems like he is sort of like reformatting some of his old campaign ideas for this current race, and focusing it on an Alvin Bragg. So in that sense, he also has is nodding a little bit towards the general election.
Let's just listen to a little sound we had, I believe, from Andrew Giuliani about the possibility of setting up a recall. Let's listen in.
I was the first gubernatorial candidate, Maurice, to call for this. I called for it right after his January 3rd memo to his assistant district attorneys. What I would do, as we don't have recall actually on the New York State Constitution right now, is I would remove him on day one, and I would invoke, like I said, Article 8, Section 13B of the New York State Constitution.
Absolutely. I would fire Alvin Bragg and anyone who doesn't do their job, willfully ignores the law, and
should there be a constitutional amendment?
Yeah, there should be, absolutely. But I would use my power as governor to remove elected officials who don't do their job, like Alvin Bragg.
There it goes, Alvin Bragg again. Let's
drink.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Last week during the Democratic debate, it was the situation in the Buffalo Stadium. We heard it more, but I think Bragg may have inched out the Buffalo Stadium. But let's just jump off that point. When you look at those 4 people on the stage, only one of them really doesn't have campaigning experience, and it was Andrew Giuliani. What was your reaction to his presentation, his preparation, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think he came off very aggressive, very angry, really right off of the start, right? It was, it's funny because in the Democratic debate where we went essentially 40 minutes, right, without even talking about COVID, COVID was really front and center right at the beginning of this debate with, one of the candidates not being vaccinated and being able to be in studio.
That could be very much a winning proposition for part of his base, right?
Sure. But, Dick, the big problem here, and we've been alluding to it all night, is the growing gulf between what it takes to win a Republican primary in New York State and what it takes to win a general election. We cannot forget that it's been 20 years since any Republican has been elected statewide, and even in 2016, right? Take it a terrible year for Democrats. We got killed in Long Island. Trump won. Still, Hillary won by 20 points in a statewide race.
If I could just say very quickly, it's also ironic that they're talking about a recall election when we have such abysmal turnout in this state. And it was actually candidate Wilson who actually talked about actually making it easier for people to vote. That was a little refreshing. I'm not gonna say very refreshing, but it was a little refreshing. So it's kind of weird that they're talking about sending people to the polls over and over and over again for a recall when we know that people just don't come out and vote in this state.
A big point that Javier makes, Robert, is the lack of Republicans being elected in this state. And what's ironic, it seems to me, is that let's say when George Pataki was governor back in 2006, I guess is when he left, he was pretty much a centrist Republican, maybe a little bit to the left even of George Bush. But these guys, all four of them, are deciding we're going to go to the right. We're going to pretty much go to the Trump bend of the party. Robert, do you see that as a successful move in a general election?
I mean, it's clearly the smartest move. I will say, just responding to something that Javier said, that in 2020 though, Trump did increase his numbers in New York, and even in the five boroughs. So that's why some Republicans are feeling energetic that they might have a breakthrough. I think that that Harry Wilson was trying to set himself up more, and to use Basil's phrase, the Glenn Youngkin mode. He didn't really take the bait on whether he would tinker with the right to abortion in New York, whereas the other three all made at least leaned into that somewhat. So I mean, if there's any one of them that seems to try and be a little bit more moderate to try and appeal to what is still a very large blue state, I think it would be Wilson, who seems to be trying to set himself up that way.
And you know, both Rob Astorino and Lee Zeldin talked about abortion and how they wanted to frame the argument, because it's going to be a big ruling with Roe v. Wade in just a week or so, or maybe even less. Let's listen to some of their conversation about Roe v. Wade and what they think of late-term abortion.
But lighting up the Empire State Building when they passed this law in 19 to have abortions legal up to the moment of birth, that's not where New Yorkers are. That's extreme. And so I think we should have a reasonable discussion on when it's appropriate to have restrictions.
We need to be promoting family, and I believe that right now New York's law is going too far when you start allowing late-term partial birth abortion.
And that's a winning argument, certainly for many Republican voters. What do you think, Javier?
Sure, it may be a winning argument for some Republican voters, but again, we need to look at what's going to be a winning argument in November, I think is the important question here. You know, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks with these leaked Supreme Court decision is that Democrats, independents around the country have actually really, energized around the issue of protecting abortion rights. The governor is certainly going to be leaning into this, and I think it's a dangerous territory for them to be in, even if it is a popular stance within, the extreme of the Republican Party.
You know, I agree with that. One thing that may nuance this for them, for the Republican candidates, is that they've tied it to mask mandates, which is interesting because they will call it hypocrisy, right? The state saying you have to get vaccinated, otherwise you lose your job. But in the case of abortion, saying, no, you can't, I can do what I want with my body. I don't think it's a winning argument overall, but I do think for them, that's the way they try to nuance this argument for their voters.
I will add on that Astorino, when this question came to him, I think he tried to put it in an umbrella of something of compassionate rhetoric. He said, I think we need to create a culture of life when it comes to this. But I think something that Republicans need to, and this is true for whether you're in New York or whether you're talking nationwide. If and when Roe v. Wade gets struck down by the Supreme Court, I think Republicans have to come up with a language how to deal with funding for pregnancies and things like that, and that's something that's not really in the rhetorical playbook for Republicans right now.
Okay, we're going to start to wrap this up here, and I'd like to get from each one of you, and we've sort of been there already, the idea that we're going to be going from a Republican primary to a general election. And we see right now, and I know Javier and I were talking about the polls right before we came in here, and it appears, at least in the Republican primary, I'll let you say it, but Zeldin,
Yeah, I think a poll came out today by Emerson College that has Zeldin up about 20 points over his second place Astorino, I believe.
Right.
He's still not breaking 50%. You know, there's still a large swath of undecided voters out there. But look, you saw Lee Zeldin playing more than any other candidate, you know, to the Trump endorsement, maybe other than Andrew Giuliani. And, you know, we'll see how that plays out. I think that, to me, is the big question of the primary over the next week. Does Trump get in? Does that help or hurt him? There's a lot of, you know, considerations for both Trump and for, you know, whoever he endorses. So I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Basil.
No, I absolutely agree. It looks like Zeldin may pull away with this. And again, yes, absolutely right. The question is, does Trump get in? It's his home state. Does he actually get involved? He's still got support, and Zeldin's very popular in his district and just outside his district. Trump still has support, particularly upstate. I see the signs when I go all over upstate. Right. So I think he may feel emboldened by making this kind of endorsement, though. Don't know that it helps. It certainly doesn't help him in the general. I don't know if it'll help at all.
How do you play there, Robert? It's a tough one. Do you bring in Trump and then risk what you might lose in the general?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think you're going to actually beg and plead for him to come in. If he decides to make an endorsement himself, he'll say, thank you, thank you, and then just kind of plunge. You just kind of plunge forward. You don't reject it, but you happily take it and then go forward.
Yeah, thanks a lot, but don't come near me. Something like that. Something like that. Anyway, well, listen, guys, this was a great roundtable discussion, and we really appreciate it. Our panel, Basil Smikle, Javier Lacayo, and Robert George, thank you so much for the discussion and your expertise. And a reminder, early voting for the primary runs from June 18th to the 26th. Election Day is Tuesday, June 28th. The polls open at 6 a.m. And for more information about the election, we have a voter guide on our website, cbsnewyork.com. I'm Dick Brennan. Thanks for coming by.